Hello, and welcome to the virtual event titled Top 5 Ways to Optimize Your Network for BYOD. I'm here with Zeus Kerravala of ZK Research and Tamir Hardof of Juniper Networks. One thing to note before I pass the presentation off to Tamir is that there is a chat feature to the bottom left of your screen. Please feel free to use this to post comments or questions to the moderator throughout the presentation. And at the end, I will pose those submitted directly to Zeus and Tamir to address. So with that, let's get started with the program. Tamir, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be discussing one of the hot topics in the market today, employee-owned devices in the workplace, or BYOD, bring your own device, and specifically 5 ways you can optimize your network to support and enable this growing trend. Our guest speaker, Zeus Kerravala, will discuss the impact and implications of BYOD in the enterprise, including the results of some of his original research. And then I will cover the networking essentials and Juniper's approach to optimizing your network for BYOD. Now, how did we get to where we are today and some of these challenges that we have to address? Well, just a short bit of context. Starting on the left, many of us remember, sometimes quite fondly, those days when the only way we could be productive was when we were sitting at our desk with a wired computer connection. And then some things started to change, so the technologies came about and released us from that, what some call the shackle, and we could actually work from home. That's the second step here. We could connect through a connected encrypted tunnel, a VPN, and work from home or some other remote location. The next step was the mobile device. This was primarily driven by the introduction and popularity of the BlackBerry devices, and this allowed us to become pretty much connected, at least for email, anywhere, anytime. And that was really the beginning of the step of how we got to where we are now. The real change came in just the last few years with the introduction of the smartphones and this ability to download apps, which really changed the way we could be productive and efficient anywhere, anytime. So the step not just from email, but being able to access enterprise apps, being able to download third-party and even non-enterprise apps that we could use for productivity. And that really was the big dimensional change that brought us to where we are today. Some examples of some of the challenges that brought. This is from a report that Juniper produced on mobile device security. And just sharing a couple of data points from that report that I think are relevant and important for us to consider here. On the left side is a data point on the total mobile malware samples across all mobile operating systems. And you can see the jump year over year from just over 11,000 to well over 28,000, almost triple the number of malware pieces that were being discovered on mobile devices. On the right side, we're focusing more on specifically the Android operating system, which as an open system has great flexibility, but can also have some potential more attention and more threats to it. And you can see how that trend really suddenly jumps up in the charts from around the October timeframe and really shoots up, and that trend is really continuing. So tremendous amount of concern and threats to be aware of on the mobile devices that we're talking about here. So this is one of 2 polling questions that we're going to ask you to participate in along the way. This will help us get some context. You'll all be able to see the results as we go as well, so you'll all get an idea of kind of where everyone is who's joined this call. So let me just quickly read through, and please do choose one answer. What is the status of BYOD in your organization? We fully support BYOD. We allow it with partial IT support. We allow it with no IT support. Or we do not allow the use of any personally owned devices. So please pick one, and you'll be able to see, it's there on the bottom left of your screen, you'll be able to see the results as well. Okay. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over at this point to our guest speaker, Zeus Kerravala. Zeus?
Thanks, Tamir. Appreciate that. And I'm anxious to see the results of the poll myself. I've got some my own survey data that I ran that I'd like to compare it to in this slide deck, so that'll be interesting to see. I think this is a really interesting topic to discuss today, the business impact and implications of BYOD. It's something that is changed IT more than I think people realize. There was a day, and I'll give you a sense of my background. I actually have an IT background. I was a CIO for a while. I worked at a consulting firm, and for about the last 10 years, I've been an analyst. But when I was in IT, we really hid behind corporate policy. There was demand for BYOD even back then. It just happened that most of the business leaders and the C-level executives really didn't understand technology very well, and the people that were pushing for it were kind of your geeky coworkers, that guy that always went to the Mac store on weekends, and people like that. And for the most part, you could just say, well, our corporate policies, we don't allow it. The problem today, though, and this is something for the people on the call that haven't put it in yet to be aware of, is it is that C-level, that CEO, that CFO, that sales manager that's saying, I don't care what our corporate policy is, you need to find a way to make this work. And so pressure from IT is coming from all different sides, and I think it's really been a pretty significant change for IT to have to deal with it that way. Now, BYOD itself doesn't really change the way we work. I think BYOD, in conjunction with a number of other so-called IT megatrends, actually does bring us closer to this vision of being able to deliver any content to any device, anywhere. And every decade or so, we go through these perfect storm scenarios where a number of forces come together. And if you think of what really kicked off the internet era, it wasn't one thing. The internet alone wasn't going to really drive us to finding new ways to work and new computing paradigms. It was the fact that we had the internet combined with low-cost broadband and cheap PCs at home, and the development of the browser and things like that. And all those forces kind of came together. Similarly, consumerization of IT, or BYOD, is being fueled by the fact that, as Tamir talked about, the devices that we use today have evolved more in the last few years than maybe at any time in history. It's incredible what you can do on a mobile device. These things are in effect computers that you hold in the palm of your hand. So now you're able to do so much more than you could before. Wireless advancements, both wireless LAN, and I put wireless LAN because it's a corporate audience, but even on the cellular side, between 4G and wireless LAN, there's really not much that you can't do over wireless that you can do over wired. And I agreed, there's a couple of apps like telepresence and things that'll probably always work better over wired. But for the most part, most corporate applications work fine over wireless today, and that's allowed us, again, to do more work in more places. Tablet computing has really changed the world as well. These are applications that we're seeing built now that are uniquely built for tablets. They take into account the fact that they have some sense of location. They have GPSs, they have cameras, things like that. And then, of course, we have a growing mobile worker population. The evolution of virtualization has led to cloud computing. And all those things together are really driving us into this new era of IT. Now, the struggle for IT is that the end-user toolkit has changed a lot, right? On the left-hand side, this was our comfort zone. This was the IT way of doing things. It was a gold standard, right? Corporate-issued desktop with the applications and content that the corporation decided the employees would have. It was a corporate-issued mobile phone, maybe. It was corporate-issued applications like Office, and then it was a VPN connection that would allow us to periodically connect into our corporation. Now, what we did with this, though, is we carried all of our content with us. So on that laptop in the top left of the screen, every possible application that any worker might use was built into that image, dropped on the PC, and you carried it with you. And then connectivity was simply used to do things like update email or get the latest copy of a document or something like that. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see it's changed. We're not working with just laptops or just mobile phones. We're also working with tablets. There are netbooks and Chromebooks that have also augmented our workplace, and there's a number of consumer applications that we've used to augment our workday as well. We use things like Dropbox. So if you don't enable BYOD, workers will simply just go use their own cloud storage to be able to move the content between the devices and things. And it's created a pretty significant challenge for IT, and it's these applications down on the bottom left that's where really the challenge is. I think much of the BYOD industry has been focused on things like mobile device management, or MDM, used to simply onboard devices. But frankly, it's not BYOD as much that IT needs to do. It's really BYOT, and that's bring your own technology, because workers are bringing in not just devices, but a number of consumer technologies in the workplace. That includes things like their own cloud-based applications, and that's something that you really can't fix by simply locking down a device, right? And that's why a broader kind of network strategy towards BYOD is necessary. Now, I'll give you a sense of where my research has fallen. This is a survey I ran towards the end of last year asking what companies' attitudes were in the use of consumer technologies. And you can see here that only 18% of organizations do not allow any consumer devices. Last year, at the same time, I ran that survey, and it was about 35%, I believe, so it was almost twice as many companies. And then the other 82% fall somewhere in the we allow it, but, that but could be we provide no support, we provide some support, or we provide full support. But by and large, most organizations are supported now, and those that don't, you never know where the pressure is going to come from. One of the companies I did some work with last year, they had a situation where the IT organization had decided that no consumer devices were allowed, and that's the way the company ran. And the company had a very, very good year, and as a thank you to the employees, the CEO actually bought every employee an iPad. So they went from supporting no consumer devices to 5,000 or 6,000, somewhere in that number, almost overnight. And so they weren't prepared, and they really struggled with that deployment. Now, why is BYOD so popular? Well, by and large, workers believe it makes them more productive. And I'm not going to sit here and debate with you whether it really does or not, but the perception is that they believe it makes them more productive. And you can look at some of the stats here. 49% believe their personal technology is better than that in the workplace. 54% believe they'd be more productive with their access to home apps. 83% feel they're more productive than they were 2 years ago. And one of the more interesting numbers is only 14% are afraid of new technology. And that's a stark contrast to maybe a decade ago when we went through Y2K. Workers back then were terrified of technology. I remember simply trying to get workers to move away from DOS and go to Windows, and you were thinking you were completely changing their life. And workers liked having the status quo. They didn't like change. Even things like changing a phone could be very detrimental to workers' productivity. Today it's different, though. Workers want more and more, and it's because they're being given more and more by the consumer technology companies and not allowing it hurts their productivity. The top left bullet, the first bullet there, on average, workers do use already about 4 consumer tools in their workday. And I'm not talking strictly about devices, but it may be a combination of a smartphone, Google Mail if there's too many restrictions in the corporate email. It could be things like Dropbox, some sort of cloud storage, things like that. So on average, it's about 4. Technically advanced users probably use more. Now, BYOD is a much more significant sea change to IT than I think most IT people realize, and much of the impact is on the network. Now, consider this, that, I'm not sure what the right number is here. My estimate is that we're going to have about 5 devices per person in 4 to 5 years. I've seen that number as high as 7. I've seen it as low as 3 to 4. But regardless, right now, there's about 2 corporate issued devices per person, and it's going to go to somewhere between 4 to 7. So that means even if your organization doesn't grow at all from a revenue or headcount perspective, you're going to be faced with supporting 2 to 3 times more devices that are connected to your network. And that's something that is a significant change. It's difficult to manage. And if you think you have challenges managing the environment today, just wait till all of a sudden the number of devices on your networks double or triple over the next couple of years. And you have to ask yourself, is your network really ready to handle that? The majority of these devices are wireless only, so it's not like you've even got the option of saying, well, just plug it into the wired port and you'll have better performance. They don't have them. They've got wireless, and frankly, a lot of them are pretty crappy wire radios in them. So all of a sudden, if they can connect at home and now they can't at the workplace, they look at there being something wrong with the corporate network. And so not only does your Wi-Fi network need to reach more places, it needs to be much more dense to be able to connect to a lot of these consumer devices with weaker radios and things on them. These devices are also very easy to use. You can create real-time video conferences with them. You can share files on them. Apple Talk is very popular in the workplace, so things like Bonjour are needed. So all of a sudden you're supporting different protocols, you're supporting different applications. They have very, very heavy traffic loads. Lastly, all of these devices rely on the network for access, right? We don't store a lot of content on these devices anymore. We store them in the cloud, and we go get them when we need them. And to me, that's the concept of true mobility, is that I, as a worker, want to be able to take whatever device with me. So if I'm going on a day trip, then I'm going to take my mobile phone with me. If I'm going to go overnight, maybe I take my tablet. And if I'm going to go for a week, I take my laptop. And in either case, I want to be able to use the applications I need with any one of those devices. And the only way to make that work effectively is to leverage the network, because expecting users to continually synchronize that data is unrealistic. And I've always said that if the user is actually the integration point for these technologies, that your initiative is going to fail. So this leads to some fairly interesting challenges, and now that BYOD is the norm. I talked about the number of wireless devices, wireless-only devices exploding. The wireless network actually becomes the primary access network for a lot of companies. And I want to be careful here. I've read a lot in the media about the all-wireless enterprise and things. There's no such thing as an all-wireless network. Okay, now the access network may be moving predominantly wireless, but if you overbuild your wireless network and you don't pay attention to the wired network, then your choke point is going to be the wired network. And so the wireless being the primary network, with the increasing amounts of bandwidth, means you need to pay attention to the wireless network, but also make sure that you have a rock-solid wired core to be able to deliver true mobility to the workers. And you can see here the number, just of connected devices in aggregate is going to grow about an order of magnitude. Now, when you look at the current architecture, and you can see here, this is a study I did showing that the growth of wireless devices, and within 2 years, 53% of organizations expect 80+% of the workers to use the wireless LAN as their primary network, and that's, just 2 years ago it was 21%. So you're looking like a 2.5 increase in the number of workers expecting wireless to be there. Now, wireless inherently has been, especially corporate wireless, fairly poor. I think, well, I don't want to say poor, spotty. It's been meant really to be an augmentation to the current wired network, and that's somewhat, the nature of it changes now. So I think wireless isn't a network of convenience anymore. It's one where continuous high-quality access is needed. And I think when you think about the characteristics of your wired network, you want your wireless network to look a lot more like your wired network does today, and that hasn't been the case, with wireless as an augmentation technology.
Hey, Zeus, let me ask you here. With these challenges that you're referring to, and the expectations that the users have that are really on the rise, what would you say are the requirements for a customer to be confident that they have the mission-critical elements in their network to support these changes?
Sure. That's actually a great question. Well, I alluded to the fact that wireless has to look more like wired. I guess I didn't specifically state what that is. I think you need to think about things that you've spent years building in your network, and that's like resiliency capabilities, modular operating systems to allow for hitless upgrades, the ability to create dedicated bandwidth. I think one of the more important elements today is unified access, being able to set a policy in your network and then have that policy be consistent across your wired and wireless network. I don't think that's the case today. In fact, there's many stories where people can't get on the wireless network and they simply plug in the wired and boom, they're connected to the network. And so I think you need to have much more consistency over the network, but then again, the characteristics your wired network has of high quality, dedicated bandwidth to deliver a very high quality user experience needs to be there, and then all the resiliency capabilities that wired networks have, the wired network vendors like Juniper have spent years building into their products need to now make their way to the wireless network. And frankly, that's not something most wireless vendors have had to focus on over the years. So that's a big change for Wi-Fi. It does change the corporate network. I think and this is, Tamir, to your question, the ability to handle real-time traffic at scale also becomes important. I think many of Wi-Fi networks today can handle some amounts of real-time traffic, but doing it at scale is a much different challenge. And scale comes when all of a sudden half your workers have a mobile device and they try doing video, or they try sharing a document or something like that. You want to make sure that the TCO of the combined technologies is less than trying to build two parallel networks. And I think the cost Right now, my research shows about 83% of the cost of running the budget to run a network is used to maintain the status quo. So that number has to come down. I think you want to have some sort of centralized control and management as well. I think historically distributed management has been unfortunately the norm, and if you're going to move to a network where you have ubiquitous wireless, then of course the network, you do want to try and manage things more from a central location. The network also needs to be more dense than it is today, and I hate this term densification, but it seems to have stuck. And so not only do you have to worry about coverage, you also have to make sure that the density to handle the increasing oncoming number of devices is there. You want to look forward to 802.11ac. I think that we'll likely see the first corporate instance of it, probably the end of this year, moving into next year. And then some of the other things I talked about: highly reliable wired core, integrated security, and the ability to create on-demand capacity.
Hey, Zeus, before we go on, I actually wanted to ask you quickly about one point on the last slide, and that was the 802.11ac. That's one that we hear coming up quite a bit, and I wanted to ask you if you could give us your thoughts on what does the move to 802.11ac mean for customers in terms of the technologies on the network and the impact on performance, and kind of what they should be thinking about in terms of needed adjustments.
Yeah, AC is an interesting technology. It certainly is going to allow for many more devices to be connected to the network. But I want to caution workers not to jump the gun. I think when you look at the incremental difference between N and AC, I think most companies and most workers will be fine with N. And considering the pressure IT is getting today, I certainly wouldn't recommend holding off on your deployment until the N technologies are there. I think there's maybe some specific use cases and types of organizations, research institutions, things that push a lot of data that can take advantage of it. But I think for most mainstream organizations, N is fine today, and it's going to be fine next year. One cautionary point: be aware of vendors that tout the snap-in upgrades or the easy upgrades to N. There is really no simple upgrade to N because the cellular patterns and things like that are different. So you're going to it's AC, sorry. Because you're still going to have to do a site survey and things like that, and just be aware that if it appears too easy, it probably is, and you want to make sure that if you're going to invest in that technology, you do it the right way. But I'd certainly, for most companies today, I'd recommend that you just use N and enjoy the benefits of it, and then once the technology is a little more mature, take a look at it.
That's great. Thank you. I know we're breaking here for a second for our second polling question, and I'll just read through it before we continue. So you should have access to answering the question, again, on your lower left side. When considering the impact of BYOD on your organization, which of the following do you consider to be the most beneficial? Increased employee productivity, business agility, better corporate collaboration, make the company a more attractive place to work, or consistent user experience across corporate and personal devices? And this is a bit of a leading or something of a trick question. As you start to read through this, some of you may identify probably more than one as a reason. Pick your number one choice here, and you'll see everyone's votes. And I'll turn it back over to Zeus.
Thanks, Tamir. I'm looking forward to seeing the responses of these as well. Now, the purpose of the webinar was to give you the top 5 reasons to use the network, to optimize the network for BYOD, and I wanted to go through these. And I think number one is that it does increase employee productivity. I mentioned this before, that workers believe that it makes them more productive, and I believe that too. And if workers believe it, then obviously the satisfaction level goes up. I think it's difficult to maintain a scalable BYOD policy if you're not leveraging the network. Business agility with new business process. This is something that I think organizations need to think about. How to build processes that are uniquely mobile. I mentioned this before, that these mobile devices are very unique in the capabilities they have. They have compasses, accelerometers. They got GPSs in them. They've got some knowledge of identity and presence. and I've talked to some app developers about this, and often you hear them complain about small screen size and things like that. And these devices are, like I said, are very unique in their capabilities, and I think one of the challenges for app developers is to figure out exactly how to use these devices, change process, and make processes that are uniquely mobile. And I think this is going to be, you're going to see tremendous innovation over the next year or so in this area. The ability to collaborate better. I actually think that mobile unified communications should be looked at as part of a BYOD strategy as well, and that enables you to communicate with more people in more places. Improved employee satisfaction. I think this can't be understated. I actually worked with a fairly large company where, and it's a brand name that everybody knows, where the organization had decided to lock down devices. They even went as far as gluing USB ports and shut and stuff like that, and there was no consumer device allowed. Their employee churn went up quite a bit, and so much so that the HR manager got involved, and it was HR, the CEO, that drove a BYOD strategy within the organization. So again, here's another example of organizations that if you fight this tide, it's going to come back and bite you. And lastly, you want to be able to have this consistent user experience across all corporate and personal devices, and that means you have to have consistent experience. Consistent policies and consistent access methods, and that will move us from this model that I discussed of being portable versus mobile. And if you look at the chart I created down at the bottom, when you think of what true mobility is, you want to have a pervasive experience across wired or wireless networks to be able to access applications that are mobile, cloud, or virtual, or premise-based. Device ownership should be IT or the worker, and you need to have ubiquitous connectivity. And if we're going to truly ever fulfill on this vision of any content to any device, then my thesis has been that the only way to really implement that is through using the network. Now, there are some risks associated with BYOD, and I wanted to just go through these quickly. The first one is that you have to concern yourself with device-level threats. So these devices are they are personal devices, and people will use them to download personal applications, and they will open up personal email, and they will bring things into your organization that maybe you don't want, and they're going to come in through the device. And so I think you do need to work, while I'm advocating a network-based strategy, the device still needs to be part of that strategy, not the centerpiece of it. There are consumer services threats. Again, it's similar to the device-level threats where maybe the two go hand in hand. You will have increased network complexity, and you think of all these things on this chart down here between wireless access and UC, trying to run desktop virtualization perhaps, cloud computing, MDM. It increases the complexity of the environment that you have, and I think simplification of the network and simplification of network processes can help a lot. I discussed the reliance on the network, and then there's a number of blind spots brought on the network that IT is going to have. I think managing consumer devices, again, you think of traditional desktop management, you deploy an agent on a desktop, you're not doing that anymore, so visibility into the network becomes very important. I've always said that if you're going to go ahead with BYOD, you need to truly know your network, and my research has shown that maybe a third of organizations at best know their network. And that means, do you really understand what traffic's running on it? Do you understand what your top talkers are? Things like that. So considerations for BYOD, push as much security as you can into the network. I was doing a CTO panel a little while ago, and one of the CTOs jokingly said that he felt like success for him was based on how fast he was willing to give up control. And I talked to him after about that, and it's not about giving up control. It's about moving control. So anything that you use to try and control or secure on the device, if you can push it into the network, that gives you much more control and scale. I talked, MDM I think is still an important consideration, although, again, used to augment your network strategy. Network access control or some sort of identity management is needed to understand who users are and what they're allowed to do where. For instance, if you've got a doctor, you wanted them to be able to access patient records on a tablet by bedside, but not down in the cafeteria. You want to have a seamless user experience across the wired and wireless network. You have to worry about compliance issues, network capacity and visibility, and then granularity of network access to be able to hand off to be able to enforce identity or enforce policy based on who users are and where they are. Some network principles to support BYOD. You want to move to a simpler network. I think flatter is better in many cases. This concept of this, especially in the data center, this multi-tier hierarchical network is very complicated. You see it often on the access edge as well. So if you can simplify your network, that's better. You want to have some sort of network agility, so ability to move capacity if you need to, virtual network services instead of having to deploy physical appliances everywhere. Automate the provisioning and management of a network, so the more you can automate, the better. Any point security, so that's being able to deploy really security at any point in the network versus only doing it at egress points based on physical appliances. And again, a big part of that is the ability to virtualize network services, and then unified wired and wireless. So instead of managing two networks, one that overlays the other, you want to be able to manage one. And in fact, in some cases, you can even throw in security as a third network that's overlaid on top. And so if you can collapse those down into one integrated network, it is going to be much simpler to manage. So this is my last slide. I'll be back later for some Q&A. But in summary, BYOD is here, right? The era is here. Don't fight it. Embrace it. And even if your organization is not doing it today, get out in front of it and start the educational process. Users are demanding BYOD as it does increase the perception. And again, if you fight it, then you're signaling to your organization that you're hurting productivity. This is a different era for IT. You need to have a laser focus on user experience, more so than just simply network operation, things we focused on before. Use a network-based approach to solving BYOD challenges, and in conjunction with that, be willing to look at alternative architectures and vendors. The way we built our networks yesterday aren't going to be the way we build them tomorrow. And if you're willing to do those things, I think you can have a fairly successful pain-free BYOD deployment. If not, then you may wind up, fighting an uphill battle for a number of years. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Tamir now for him to go through what Juniper is doing to solve this problem.
Great, thank you, Zeus. That was terrific. I want to spend the next few minutes with you talking about kind of the how aspect. We actually hit on the 5 ways to optimize your network for BYOD, and I'm going to circle back to that, but I'm going to take us there by going through the how aspect of it first. So most of you have been dealing with mobile device access for a long time. Corporate-owned devices that you do manage and control, and guest devices requiring limited or often temporary access. And Juniper takes a holistic approach, and the holistic approach to mobile device access views the newer trend of employee-owned devices simply as another element of mobile device access. Traditionally, corporate IT distinguishes between 2 types of users: the trusted users, basically the employees, and untrusted users, generally guests or contractors, visitors, and so on. And BYOD represents another way to address secure and reliable access for the same trusted users there. BYOD means enabling employees bringing their own device with their own configs and apps. Corporate IT is often getting a little more complex, and the network needs to differentiate between users, different devices, and provide the same high level of network experience and resources, no matter the device, really based on who the user is. So taking more of a user-centric approach. It no longer makes sense for the network to be segregated between the guest and the employee network. All users bear a certain level of risk, and all users need to be managed according to that risk and to their credentials. Addressing the BYOD challenge means for the IT department to provide a coordinated, consistent, and comprehensive approach to the network. And in such a complex world, it's essential to keep this, to keep IT simple and efficient. And why does the simplicity matter? Well, while BYOD has big implications for the enterprise network, it is essential for the IT department to not get tangled up in the complexity. And at Juniper, we believe that a proper, holistic implementation of BYOD must be simple to deploy and simple to manage. With a holistic approach to BYOD, This helps reduce the cost and complexity and achieve operational excellence. And there's 3 points here that we want to touch on. So the first is operational efficiency, which means a more efficient way to manage your network. Juniper's solution saves time, lowers costs by streamlining customer operations, and freeing up performance from existing network investments. Secondly, with business continuity, mission-critical networks and applications can continuously deliver the productivity and competitive edge that customers are expecting from their network. And third, in an ever-changing business environment with new customer requirements, changing expectations, business agility is critical for the enterprise to adopt and maintain the competitive lead. As the business context evolves, the network must be built for any application or service to offer freedom of choice for devices and applications and not limit the pace of business innovation. So simplicity is key here. An implementation that respects the principle of simplicity will unleash the full potential of BYOD by keeping the network manageable, easy to scale, and able to deliver a great user experience. And there are 3 cornerstones to that simplicity. Orchestrated management. Manage and secure the entire campus network, including wired, wireless, and mobility. Network access, policy, and security follow the user as they move within and outside the campus and across this wired and wireless networks. Secondly, the single network architecture. So a tightly integrated, robust, future-proof network for any application, any device, and all users that handles voice, video, data, and collaboration. A single network architecture means keeping the network flatter and unified between the wired and the wireless networks. Single network architecture. A tightly integrated, the third, one experience. This remains consistent and high quality no matter the connection type that is being used. That experience is provided by the security levels that must be based on the user rather than on every device on the network. And it must not waver no matter from where the user is accessing the data. Managing security at the data level instead of per device allows IT to protect the company resources without having to touch every point or device. So, how are we delivering the mission-critical networks? Well, Simply Connected is Juniper's vision or portfolio for an integrated portfolio of resilient, wired, wireless, and security products that simply enable mobility at scale. This is a holistic approach to the problem IT organizations face, enabling the mobile enterprise. And Juniper's Simply Connected solution is really the best approach for BYOD, and it's based on 3 key pillars here. And what is usually the first thing that IT thinks about when faced with addressing BYOD? And in most cases, it's the security elements. And we talked about some of the threats and some of the challenges faced with security. Let's just talk about that for a moment. A coordinated security delivers safe and simple mobility while protecting the company's assets. So, any-point security and self-provisioning. Perceived security risks are often what prevents IT departments from implementing BYOD strategies. And with any-point security and self-provisioning, Juniper helps simplify and secure any point on the network with point-and-click provisioning. Role-based access, accounting for profile, identity, device, and role, combined with nested application visibility and security enforcement, provide the IT department with comprehensive control over the network to secure the access to and the utilization of network resources. Coordinated threat control and management, automated for wired and wireless environments and mobile devices. Juniper delivers a complete security suite with zero-day attack prevention, data loss mitigation, and mobile device security and management. Now, after security, after all these devices are now allowed onto the network, you've created policies, put in place, what's the next primary concern? And that's really the performance at scale. So sustaining that performance at scale means delivering scalability while keeping the network simple. So the virtual network infrastructure, switches in the Juniper EX switching line support virtual chassis technology, with all supporting 8 quality of service hardware queues. This simplifies the architecture of the network by reducing the number of uplinks that are required for inter-switch links. This simplified architecture enables better scaling, frees up workloads by enabling east-west communications within the virtual chassis, and prioritizes important content for business-critical applications that run on BYOD-enabled devices. The holistic approach to the BYOD network, right? This is here as well. Juniper EX series switches are based on open standards and work with third-party apps and devices to form a complete BYOD solution. Additionally, the solution is based on a holistic architecture to generate efficiencies and keep the network simple, easy, and easy to scale. And then the third kind of point that you will generally arrive at after dealing with security and performance at scale is really the resiliency. A highly resilient network delivers an automated, uninterrupted service on business-critical applications. And I'll give another example here. So I could certainly remember not that long ago, just a few years ago, when if I received a link on my mobile device or my smartphone to a video, my first thought was, well, I'm going to automatically wait till I get to my desk or to a wired connection to watch that video. The expectations that I had for the wireless network were not that high. Today, that's different, though. We've very quickly become accustomed to expecting the same level of experience on our mobile devices that we have on our wired or desktop devices. So now, without hesitation, we click through and we immediately expect to see that video without a long download time, without the buffering, and without choppiness. So how is that maintained, and what goes on in the infrastructure to support that type of user experience and resiliency? Well, BYOD-enabled businesses are increasingly dependent on this type of uninterrupted application availability, regardless of device or location. Multiple levels of redundancy, high availability with virtual chassis and virtual cluster, and simplified operations that reduce human errors and downtime are at the heart of enabling resiliency and continuity for business-critical applications. So this kind of takes us full circle to kind of the reason why we're here today, and that is how does all this fit together, and that gets tied into the top 5 ways to optimize your network for BYOD. Zeus touched on this, and now I'm going to kind of circle this back with the ways in which we make this happen. So first, build a flatter, simpler network. Flatter is simpler. Legacy architectures dictate multi-tier networks that are overly complex and have unnecessarily high latency. They're estimated 30 to 40% more expensive than 2-tier networks and don't offer the necessary levels of flexibility required to make business-level network changes in a timely manner. A flat network provides a much simpler, more scalable design. Second, deploy an agile solution. Network agility has become mandatory. So building an IT environment capable of supporting greater business agility to scale and allocate app resources based on changing business contexts. What is business critical today might not be tomorrow. The key to competitiveness is to remain agile and adapt to changing environments. And to achieve this, IT departments have been building more agile compute, storage, and application environments through the use of virtualization technology, for example. Third, simplify with automated provisioning. BYOD, cloud-based applications, and mobility are dynamic in nature, and the network needs to be equally dynamic. However, manually provisioning the network and ongoing configurations is often far too slow and error-prone to keep up with this dynamic nature. Network managers need robust tools such as scripts and self-provisioning applications to automate network operations and keep the network fluid. Fourth, plan for any point security. Perceived security risk associated with enabling third-party devices and applications to a proprietary network are often what keeps IT departments from implementing a proper BYOD strategy. With any point security and self-provisioning, Juniper simplifies and secures any point on the network with point-and-click provisioning. And fifth, unify the wired and wireless network. Legacy networks include a high-performance wired core with a wireless network typically deployed as an overlay. With this model, wired and wireless networks are managed independently, creating an inconsistent user experience. For BYOD to be successful, wireless networks must look and act more like the wired network. Unified policy, performance, and resiliency features are critical to a successful BYOD implementation. So that wraps up the content portion here. I do want to share with you a number of next steps and takeaways that we'd like you to consider. So what we want you to take away from this, that BYOD is about business agility and productivity, and that it's not just a matter of access, it impacts the entire network, and the network really does need to be enabled for BYOD. And this enablement does not need to mean completely forklifting, replacing your existing network. There are many ways in which You can start with what you have, and the best practice there is that start with a network assessment. And this is one of the things that I think is important. We recommend this frequently. Do an honest network assessment. Work with your partners, your resale partners or your consultants, and do an assessment of the pieces that you have in place, where you can start, the pieces of your infrastructure that can be leveraged, and what the best direction would be for you to take it to the next level. Next steps. So be on the lookout. You're going to receive an email following up from your participation in this webinar. That will include a link to a white paper that will take you down the path of a little more deeply on the top 5 reasons to optimize your network for BYOD. We also provided here a link to our website where you can find a great deal more information about Juniper's approach, as well as all the product level information and details that will help you as well, and some email addresses here for you to follow up with us directly if you choose. With that, I want to just first ask our guest speaker, Zeus, if there's anything else that you'd like to add before we take some questions.
No, just that again, I think the urgency is there to get started today, and I do believe that taking that network-based approach and you following the guidelines that we both put together can actually help people have a relatively pain-free deployment. It's not a simple thing, that's for sure, but if done correctly, it can be made somewhat simple.
Excellent. So why don't we see if we have questions?
Great. Thank you, Zeus and Tamir. We actually do have some questions that came in during the presentation, so we'll begin to pose those to you. First, a question from Daniela. What is the difference between BYOD and mobility?
Well, I don't know if you want to go. I'll go first. In my mind, BYOD is specifically about enabling a device to operate in the workplace. You could actually have consumer devices in the workplace and not be mobile. In my mind, I think mobility is more the concept that I can move around my organization and switch devices and have access to the applications I want. You think of the portable way of working where we were manually synchronizing information between devices and things, and that to me is device-led portability versus true mobility, which is where you leverage the network to be able to move content and distribute it to wherever you need it with that consistent experience.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, great. Then another question from Stevie. We have an existing WLAN infrastructure already. What do I need to do to enable BYOD?
So I'll start with that.
Sure.
Des, if you want to start?
Yeah, well, I think it's, again, this is similar to the previous question. Wireless doesn't necessarily mean BYOD. I think a lot of it depends on, when that wireless infrastructure was deployed. I think you want to understand if it has the right services to enable identity management and things like that. It's mobility is a much broader strategy, though, and I think you need to start with a network audit and make sure you have the proper bandwidth in place, you have the capacity to be able to manage more devices, and you have the overhead to be able to plan for the growth. I know you had some in your takeaways. Actually, that was a good guide to getting started.
Yep, I think that's it. Excellent.
Okay, and then we also have a question from Roberto and Chan also had a similar question. What are some of the common threats / malware for mobility? How do we get protected from them?
So I'll start that one. It's an excellent question. So as we've seen, there's definitely a very dramatic increase in growth in threats and vulnerabilities on mobile devices. And there's several ways to address that, both from the endpoints but also on the network. But let me take a step back, and that is what we've kind of been threading through this whole discussion, and that is taking a holistic approach and not looking at it necessarily as a point issue. So you want to think about how you're able to both first create a relevant and necessary policy that's based on the user, regardless of which device they're on, whether they're on their mobile device, whether it's corporate issued or personal, and any other devices that they're going to be bringing into the corporate network. Being able to enforce that really is where you get the full end-to-end security capability. So being able to enforce the security regardless of the device they're on, and specific to that question about the mobile device that they're bringing with them. So understanding the context of where that user is and what they're doing on that device, what apps they're using on it, whether they're enterprise sanctioned or not. These are the kind of things that you need visibility into, and enforcement of the policy will really help add a very strong layer of security there. Now, taking it that a step lower, there's of course back to the point products, and that is having an endpoint client is one method. There's a whole discussion you can have on whether you want to go the client or clientless route there for security on mobile devices. And then there's how to address and inspect and protect the traffic at the network and gateway level. So a couple of different ways to go about that can help assure the security of the network and resources and data on the network when allowing those employee-owned mobile devices on the network.
Okay. And we just had one more question. Yep, we just had one more question come in from a guest. It says, what are the recommended apps for BYOD employees to connect to the network that have minimal impact on network resources, if there are any?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer without understanding the context and the vertical. I think you can run almost any app as long as you treat it properly, right? If you know, depending on what kind of organizations you are, I've talked to companies that have used desktop virtualization technology to containerize certain applications. I think you want to be able to, you know, at a minimum, be able to allow the worker to onboard the device and secure the device. I think it's not as much of from an apps perspective. There's a core group of applications like email and some different communications apps, like maybe even a corporate soft phone, things like that you want to have to allow better collaboration. When you're talking about productivity apps, that's going to have a lot to do with the vertical, right? Banking is going to be much different than medical, which is going to be much different than, say, legal. Tamir, I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that.
No, I agree. I think that was right. So, and I think we're getting to the top of the hour. So I think we're going to wrap up. So I just want to say on behalf of myself and Juniper to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank Zeus, our guest speaker, for his terrific input and guidance here.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you everybody for being on this.
And as a reminder to attendees, if you are eligible, you will receive your Amazon gift code within the next couple of weeks. And additionally, within the next week, we'll send you that follow-up email with the white paper and on-demand version of this webinar. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. Thanks again, Zeus and Tamir. Have a great rest of the day.